Welcome to Monk's Temple. Settle in. Let the day's tension soften. Notice your breath. In and out. There's nowhere to go. Nothing to achieve. Just this moment and this shared space. We often approach our inner world like a garden that's overgrown with weeds. We see thoughts we don't want, feelings we judge as wrong, patterns we dislike. Our instinct is to grab the sharpest tool and start hacking away. We believe that if we cut forcefully enough, if we are brutally honest in our pruning, we will finally create order and beauty. We call this discipline. We call it self-improvement. But from the perspective of the Dharma, the Buddha's teachings, this approach misses a fundamental truth. You cannot attack a part of yourself and call it healing. Violence, even turned inward, only begets more violence. It creates a split, the one who attacks, and the one who is attacked. A civil war in the psyche. The Buddha's core insight was the end of suffering, dukkha. And one of the primary sources of suffering is this very inner conflict, this aversion we have toward our own experience. We don't just feel sadness, we feel sadness, and then we feel anger at ourselves for feeling sad. We don't just make a mistake, we make a mistake, and then we construct a vast, painful identity around being the kind of person who makes mistakes. This is adding a second layer of pain on top of the first. Buddhism invites us to see this mechanism clearly. The first layer may be unavoidable life pain. The second layer, the shame, the harsh self-talk, the relentless replay, is optional. It is a choice of mind. And we can learn to make a different choice. Let me tell you about Maya. She was a gifted teacher, beloved by her students. But she held herself to an impossible standard. After every class, her mind would replay the hour, highlighting every stumble over a word, every question she didn't answer perfectly. This ritual, which she called her review, was a quiet torture. She believed it was what kept her sharp, what prevented her from becoming complacent. One evening, after a class that had ended with students giving her a spontaneous round of applause, she was in her car, once again dissecting her performance. Suddenly, she saw it. The applause had faded in minutes, but her self-criticism was still going, an hour later. The appreciation was fleeting, but the punishment was enduring. In that moment, she realized her review wasn't refining her teaching. It was eroding her joy. The tool she used for growth was actually blunting her spirit. If Maya's story echoes in your own life, if you know the sound of that relentless inner review, you are in the right place. This journey is about replacing that sound with one of understanding. If you'd like to explore this path with us, consider subscribing to Monk's Temple. Together, we learn not to fight ourselves, but to understand what true peace requires. Maya's insight points to a key Buddhist concept, right effort. This is not about maximum effort, straining until you break. It is about appropriate effort. Wise effort. It's the effort of a gardener who knows you cannot pull on a shoot to make it grow faster. You can only prepare the soil, provide water, ensure sunlight, and then allow. Your effort is in creating the conditions for growth, not in forcing the growth itself. When we apply harsh self-criticism, we are pulling on the shoot. We are trying to force ourselves into a shape through sheer will, and in the process, we damage the roots. Right effort in inner work means creating the conditions for peace. Which often means simply ceasing the activities that create war. We often live in a state of self-surveillance. We are rarely just experiencing life. We are experiencing life and simultaneously commenting on it, grading it, comparing it to an ideal. We are eating a meal while thinking, I shouldn't be eating this. We are resting while thinking, I should be more productive. This splits our attention. It drains the vitality from the present moment. The Buddhist practice of mindfulness is, in part, the practice of ending this surveillance. It is the gentle return, again and again, to direct experience, the taste of the food, the feeling of rest in the body, without the added layer of editorial commentary. This surveillance feels responsible. It feels like we are on top of things. But it creates a low-grade anxiety, a background hum of not enough. We become strangers to our own lives, watching ourselves on a screen instead of living in our skin. The path of wisdom involves turning off the monitor and stepping back into the living world of sensation, of breath, of the heart beating in your chest. It is here, in this uncommented experience, that peace begins to whisper. The mind's habit of self-attack is often rooted in a noble desire, to be good, to be better. But it mistakes the map for the territory. It believes that by fiercely criticizing the current map, our present self, we will somehow produce a better one. But a map is only a representation. Lasting change doesn't come from criticizing the map, it comes from patiently, curiously exploring the actual territory of our direct experience. What are you actually feeling? Where do you feel it in your body? What thought just passed by? This curious exploration, free from judgment, is the fertile ground where real understanding, and therefore real, organic change, takes root. So tonight, begin with this simple practice. As you listen, notice when a thought arises that judges you, the voice of the inner critic. Don't argue with it. Don't believe it. Don't try to silence it. Simply acknowledge its presence. You might even silently say, "Ah, there is the criticizing voice." And then, gently return your attention to the sound of this voice, or to the physical sensation of your breath. You are practicing disidentification. You are learning that you are not the voice, you are the awareness that hears the voice. And in that space of awareness, a new possibility is born, the possibility of choice. The possibility of peace. The belief that often holds our internal war in place is a seductive and seemingly logical one, the belief that pain equals progress. We are culturally conditioned to accept this equation. In the gym, we seek the burn. In our careers, we valorize the grind. We speak of growing pains. It feels natural, then, to apply this same logic to our inner, moral development. We assume that if an introspective process doesn't hurt, if looking at our flaws doesn't feel like a lash, we must not be doing it right. We confuse suffering for sincerity, and intensity for insight. Buddhism gently but firmly questions this assumption. The historical Buddha's own spiritual journey began with extremes of self-mortification. Starving himself, enduring great pain, because he too believed that awakening must be earned through agony. He discovered it was a dead end. His liberation came not through adding more suffering, but through a profound shift in understanding, through a mindful attention that was compassionate, not cruel. The middle way he discovered was a path that rejected both self-indulgence and self-punishment. This is a critical, often overlooked point. The Buddha explicitly included harsh asceticism, the punishment of the body and mind, as an obstacle to peace, not a path to it. Yet, the mind clings to the pain as progress model because it provides a clear, if painful, metric. Pain is a strong sensation. It is immediate and demanding. When we are in emotional pain about our past actions, it feels like we are actively working on it. The discomfort creates a sense of momentum, of seriousness. Sitting quietly, allowing understanding to arise without drama, can feel passive, suspicious, like we're getting away with something. The ego, the part of us that wants to do and achieve, prefers the measurable agony of guilt to the immeasurable quiet of clarity. Let me introduce you to Daniel. Daniel was a recovering perfectionist in his work as a software engineer. Every bug in his code, every missed deadline, triggered not just problem solving, but a full-scale internal audit of his character. He would lie awake, his mind replaying the error, berating himself for his carelessness. He believed this nocturnal self-flagellation was what made him a thorough professional. It was his quality assurance. One week, a minor bug he'd introduced slipped into a live product update. It was fixed within an hour, with minimal impact. But for Daniel, the internal cascade was catastrophic. He spent days in a fog of shame, his productivity plummeting, his interactions with colleagues strained by his defensive attitude. His manager, concerned, pulled him aside and said, "Daniel, the bug took an hour to fix. Why are you still in crisis mode a week later?" That question struck him. He saw that his quality assurance ritual wasn't preventing errors. It was ensuring that every error, however small, would metastasize into a days-long personal disaster. His pain wasn't making him a better engineer, it was making him a brittle and fearful one. Daniel's story illustrates the karma of self-hatred. In Buddhism, karma is not fate or punishment. It is the law of cause and effect on the level of intention and habit. Literally, it means action. Every time you perform an action, including the mental action of attacking yourself, you strengthen the tendency to perform that action again. You are carving a neural pathway. If you repeatedly practice self-hatred, you become an expert in self-hatred. You train your mind to default to aggression when faced with a flaw. This has direct, observable consequences: a body that is perpetually tense, a mind that is defensive and closed to learning, a perception that sees the world as a confirming echo of your own unworthiness. This is not metaphor. It is psychological and physiological fact. The action of self-hatred creates a reality of suffering. It is a seed that reliably grows a thorny tree. This is why the Buddhist path emphasizes intention so deeply. The intention behind your inner dialogue matters. Is your intention to understand, to learn, to care? Or is your intention to punish, to condemn, to inflict pain? The latter intention, even if dressed up as justice or improvement, plants seeds of future suffering. It creates what we might call an inner ecosystem of fear. In an ecosystem of fear, everything is seen as a threat. New challenges are not met with curiosity but with dread. Feedback is not information but an attack. This is not a mind that can grow wisely, it is a mind that is constantly braced for impact. So, what is the alternative to this pain-based model of growth? Buddhism points to understanding as the true catalyst. Not intellectual understanding, but a deep, felt, embodied seeing of how things are. When you truly see, with compassionate clarity, how a particular habit, say, snapping in anger, creates a wave of suffering for yourself and others, the motivation to change arises naturally. It is not forced. It is like pulling your hand back from a flame. You don't need to hate your hand or give yourself a lecture about fire safety. You simply see the cause, fire, and effect, burning. And the adjustment happens effortlessly. The wisdom is the action. This requires cultivating a different quality of mind, curiosity instead of condemnation. Imagine two scientists studying a mysterious phenomenon. One scientist approaches it with disgust, shouting at the specimen, "You're terrible and wrong. Why are you like this?" The other scientist observes quietly, noting conditions, patterns, and triggers. Which one is more likely to understand the phenomenon? Our inner world is that phenomenon. When we approach our anger, our fear, our procrastination with the harsh voice of the first scientist, we learn nothing except how to be afraid of ourselves. When we approach it with the gentle, observant curiosity of the second scientist, we begin to gather data. This feeling of overwhelm arises when I have 3 deadlines looming. This sharp anger flashes when I feel disrespected. This data is priceless. It is the raw material of self-knowledge and genuine change. The practice, then, is to begin to notice the moments when the old pain-based programming kicks in. You make a mistake. The first, instinctive wave is the desire to punish. In that sliver of a moment between the mistake and the self-attack, there is a space. The space may be tiny, but it is there. That space is your point of freedom. In that space, you can choose a different intention. You can choose to breathe. You can choose to say, "Interesting." You can choose to ask, "What just happened?" This is not letting yourself off the hook. This is switching from being a prisoner in the courtroom to being the investigator at the scene. The investigator's job is not to deliver a verdict, but to understand the causes, so the event doesn't happen again. This shift, practiced consistently, changes everything. It changes the karma you are creating in this very moment. Shall we continue to explore how to build this new, compassionate inner landscape? Let's explore a concept that is often the silent engine of our self-punishment, the belief that peace must be earned. We treat inner calm not as a birthright, not as the mind's default state when it's not agitated, but as a reward. A prize we receive only after we've crossed a finish line of sufficient suffering, atonement, or self-improvement. We create a hidden ledger in our minds. I was patient today, so I've earned 30 minutes of peace. I apologized for that old mistake, so I'm allowed to feel a little lighter. But I snapped at my partner this morning, so my peace account is back in the negative. We are moral accountants of our own inner weather. This belief is one of the most subtle and tenacious forms of suffering. It ensures that peace is always conditional, always just out of reach, perpetually postponed until we become someone else. Someone better, purer, wiser. The present moment, therefore, becomes a waiting room. We are not allowed to fully inhabit it, to rest in it, because we haven't yet qualified. We haven't earned our ticket. This turns life into a perpetual audition for a role called the person who deserves to be at ease. The Buddha's teachings offer a radical challenge to this economy. In the Dhammapada, he states, peace is the highest happiness. He does not say peace is the reward for happiness, or the result of good deeds. He points to it as a state that is fundamentally available, not as payment for virtue, but as the natural consequence of seeing clearly and letting go of craving and aversion. The peace he speaks of is uncovered, not manufactured. It is like the sun, always shining behind the clouds. Your practice is not to build the sun, but to patiently, gently, disperse the clouds. The idea that you must earn the sun keeps you busy constructing ladders to reach it, never noticing that you are standing in its light, if only you would look up from your labor. I want to tell you about a man named Samuel. Samuel grew up in a tradition that emphasized atonement and worthiness. He carried this framework into his adult life, long after he'd left the formal religion behind. His inner dialogue was a constant calculation. If he worked an extra hour, he earned the right to relax. If he donated to charity, he earned a day without guilt. If he lost his temper, he would pay for it by revoking his own leisure, forcing himself to work late or denying himself a simple pleasure. He believed this system kept him moral, humble, and driven. But over decades, it bred a deep exhaustion and a covert resentment. He noticed he could never truly enjoy anything. A peaceful walk in the park would be interrupted by the thought, do I really deserve this right now? Did I do enough good today? His joy was always on probation. One afternoon, watching his dog sleep utterly content in a sunbeam, completely free of any concept of deserving, Samuel was struck by a wave of grief. He realized he had built a cage of conditionality around his own heart. His entire life was a transaction, and the currency was his own peace of mind. The dog was free because it had never been taught it had to earn the sun. Samuel's story reveals the mechanism of merit thinking applied to our inner state. It turns spiritual or ethical development into a cosmic scorecard. This mindset is not only exhausting, it actively prevents the very peace it seeks. Why? Because the mind that is busy tracking scores, measuring worthiness, and evaluating if it has done enough is a mind that is not at rest. It is a mind in a state of subtle agitation, of relentless self-referential thought. Am I there yet? Did I do it right? Is this calm I'm feeling real, or have I just tricked myself? This is the noise that obscures the silent, already present peace. Buddhism encourages a shift from doing to become to seeing to understand. The practice is not to accumulate enough merit points to purchase peace from some internal judge. The practice is to quiet the judge through insight. When you see, clearly and without drama, how your own thoughts of unworthiness create tension, how the belief, I am not enough yet, tightens your chest and shortens your breath, something begins to loosen. You see the thought as a thought, not as a truth. You see the belief as a conditioned pattern, not as reality. And in that seeing, the pattern loses its power to dictate your inner climate. This is where the practice of mindfulness becomes essential, not as a tool for self-improvement, but as a tool for self-liberation. You are not being mindful to become a better person who deserves peace. You are being mindful to see what is actually happening, right now, in your experience. And what you may begin to see is that underneath the layer of calculating thoughts, have I earned this, there is a layer of simple sensation. The feeling of the breath. The weight of the body. The sound in the room. In this direct experience, there is no ledger. There is no past, no future, no you that is separate from the experience, needing to qualify for it. There is just the experiencing itself. And in that bare awareness, a natural, unearned calm can often be found. It was there all along, beneath the noise of your accounting. The fear, of course, is that if we let go of this earning mentality, we will become lazy, complacent, morally adrift. This is the ego's last stand. It claims the whip is necessary for motivation. But observe this closely, has the whip truly led to sustained, wise action? Or has it led to action fueled by fear and guilt, action that is brittle, resentful, and prone to collapse. The motivation that arises from clear understanding is of a different quality. It is stable, compassionate, and resilient. It is the motivation of a gardener who tends the plants out of love for the garden, not out of fear of being punished by the garden's owner. Your invitation now is to experiment with suspending the economy, just for a few moments. In a quiet moment today, perhaps when you feel a flicker of natural peace, looking at a tree, hearing a bird, feeling the warmth of a cup in your hands, notice if the thought arises, "Do I deserve this?" See it. Acknowledge it. And then, gently, see if you can put the thought down like a heavy bag you've been carrying. Don't argue with it. Don't believe it. Just set it aside, and return your full attention to the tree, the bird, the warmth. Receive the experience without an intermediary, without an accountant. Let the experience be direct, unmediated by condition. This is not a reward. This is reality, meeting you exactly where you are. Shall we continue to untangle these deep-seated beliefs? There is a hidden pride in our suffering. It is a quiet, grim pride, but pride nonetheless. It is the voice that whispers, "At least I'm hard on myself. At least I don't let myself off the easy way." We wear our self-criticism like a badge of honor, a proof of our depth, our seriousness, our moral rigor. We believe that the person who forgives themselves quickly is shallow, that the person who moves on without sufficient self-inflicted pain is avoiding responsibility. In this way, we turn our own pain into a credential. This is one of the mind's most clever traps, because it uses the language of virtue to perpetuate violence. It convinces us that the darkness we carry is proof of our light. Buddhism looks directly at this mechanism. It understands that the ego, the sense of a separate, solid self, can sustain itself not only on victories and praise, but just as effectively, sometimes more effectively, on blame and defeat. "I am the worst" is a statement with just as much certainty and identity as "I am the best." Both keep the I center stage. Both are forms of clinging. When we cling to an identity as the one who failed, the one who must suffer for their sins, we are still clinging. We are still building a story of me. And any story, even a painful one, can feel safer than the open, storyless space of pure awareness. The mind would often rather be a clearly defined villain in its own drama than an anonymous extra in the vast, peaceful mystery of being. This is why letting go of self-punishment can feel so frightening. It's not just the fear of becoming careless. It's the fear of losing your identity, your role, your part in the play. If you are no longer the guilty one, who are you? The ego dreads this question. It would rather continue the painful, familiar script than face the blank page of possibility. Let me share with you the story of Elena. Elena was a dedicated activist, pouring her heart into environmental causes. She lived with a constant, low hum of guilt. Guilt for using a plastic bag, for driving a car, for not doing enough. She wore this guilt like a hair shirt, believing it was the fuel for her work. It proved she really cared, unlike those complacent people. At a retreat, during a silent walking meditation, she had a sudden, jarring insight. She realized she was spending more mental energy on berating herself for her imperfections than on the actual, strategic work of creating change. Her guilt had become a performance for an internal audience to prove her purity. In that moment, she saw the pride in it. The subtle superiority of being the one who feels the guilt more acutely than others. She saw that her guilt wasn't helping the planet, it was exhausting her, making her judgmental of allies, and narrowing her focus to her own moral scorecard instead of the wider, collective need. Letting go of that guilt identity felt, at first, like a betrayal of her cause. But what emerged was a cleaner, more sustainable energy, determination without drama, compassion without self-crucifixion. Elena's insight points to a pivotal Buddhist concept, non-self or anatta. This is not a nihilistic denial of your existence. It is a liberating, practical insight into the fluid, conditioned, and interconnected nature of what you called me. When you see yourself as a fixed entity, the guilty one, every experience gets filtered through that solid lens. You are trapped in a room with only one painting on the wall. The teaching of anatta is an invitation to see that the wall can hold many paintings, or none at all. That you are not the painting. You are the space in which paintings appear and fade. Your guilt, your shame, your pride, these are paintings. They are not the wall. When you stop identifying so completely with one painful painting, you begin to sense the open space around it. And in that space, freedom breathes. This is where we must understand the profound difference between humility and self-loathing. They are often confused. We think that by hating ourselves, we are being humble. But true humility in the Buddhist sense is not about having a low opinion of yourself. It is about having an accurate opinion of your place in the vast, interdependent web of life. It is the recognition that you are not the center of the universe. Paradoxically, intense self-loathing is incredibly self-centered. It puts you and your flaws at the absolute center of the narrative. Look how bad I am. Look how much I suffer for my mistakes. This is still a story starring me. Humility is the quiet understanding that you are a part of the flow, capable of both causing and alleviating suffering, learning and forgetting, all within the human condition. It doesn't inflate you with pride, and it doesn't crush you with contempt. It simply places you, honestly, in the stream. The path, then, involves a gentle but firm disidentification. When the thought arises, I am a failure, the practice is not to argue, no, I'm not. Or to agree, yes, I am. Both options keep you fused with the thought. The practice is to step back and notice, there is a thought claiming I am a failure. You are the awareness witnessing the thought, not the thought itself. This creates a critical gap. In that gap, you have a choice. You are no longer a puppet jerked around by every self-critical string. You are the puppeteer who can choose to set the strings down. This practice can feel unnatural at first. The mind, addicted to its storylines, will protest. It will say you are in denial, that you are spiritually bypassing. This is why we pair disidentification with compassionate curiosity. You are not ignoring the pain, you are changing your relationship to it. Instead of asking, why am I such a failure, you can ask, what does this feeling of failure feel like in my body? Where is it located? What is its texture? This inquiry moves you out of the abstract story and into the tangible, present moment reality of sensation. And sensation, when met with gentle attention, often changes or dissolves on its own. The story needs a narrator to survive. Direct, compassionate experience does not. So tonight, you might try this. When you notice that familiar, heavy wave of self-judgment, perhaps after a small mistake, a social awkwardness, a moment of impatience, pause. Take one conscious breath. Then, inwardly, name what is happening. Judging. Self-attack. The old story. Just the label. Then, feel. Drop your attention from the storyline in your head down into the physical feeling in your body. The tight chest, the sunken feeling, the heat in the face. Breathe into that space, not to change it, but to offer it a moment of kind attention. You are not your failure. You are the awareness holding this temporary storm of feeling. And awareness can hold anything without being destroyed by it. This is the beginning of real humility, and the end of the pride of pain. Shall we go deeper into this practice of holding space for ourselves? We come now to a crossroads in the mind, a place where two paths diverge. One is wide, well-trodden, and lined with familiar signposts. This is the path of self-correction. It feels active, responsible, and clear. The other path is quieter, less defined. It is the path of self-understanding. To our conditioned minds, this second path can look passive, even negligent. It seems to lack the vigorous energy we associate with growth. Our entire upbringing has taught us that to fix a problem, we must apply force. A dirty dish requires scrubbing. A crooked picture requires straightening. A flawed character, therefore, must require the forceful, persistent application of criticism. We have imported a mechanic's mindset into the delicate ecosystem of the heart. Buddhism offers a different paradigm. It suggests that the mind is less like a machine with broken parts to be hammered back into shape, and more like a garden. You do not shout at a wilted plant to make it grow. You do not punish a flower for not blooming on your schedule. You investigate the conditions. Is there enough sunlight? Is the soil nourished? Is there sufficient water? Lasting change comes from adjusting the conditions, not from attacking the plant. In the same way, our unskillful behaviors, our anger, our fear, our procrastination, are not fundamental flaws to be condemned, but symptoms of underlying conditions. The conditions might be unmet needs, unprocessed pain, mistaken beliefs, or simple exhaustion. The path of self-understanding is the patient work of a gardener tending to these conditions, not a mechanic wielding a wrench. This is the essence of the Buddha's teaching on dependent origination. Nothing exists independently. Every mental state, every action, arises dependent on a complex web of causes and conditions. When we habitually respond to a symptom, a harsh word, with condemnation, "I'm a terrible person," we ignore the entire web that led to it. We are treating the smoke while ignoring the fire. Wisdom involves tracing the smoke back to its source with calm curiosity. What was I feeling right before I spoke? What thought triggered that feeling? What need was beneath that? This inquiry is not an excuse, it is the only map that can lead to the root of the pattern. Let me tell you about a man named Ben. Ben had a pattern of withdrawing emotionally when he felt stressed. His partner would reach out, and Ben would become distant, short, building a wall. Afterwards, he would be flooded with guilt. His method of self-correction was brutal. He would mentally replay his cold behavior, call himself emotionally stunted, a bad partner, and vow to be more open. But the next time stress hit, the wall went up again. The cycle continued for years. One day, during a meditation, instead of following his usual guilt spiral, he got curious. He asked, in a gentle inner voice, "What is that wall for?" The answer that arose was surprising: protection. In a flash, he saw it. When he felt overwhelmed, his system perceived a threat. The wall wasn't malice, it was an ancient, automatic defense against being overwhelmed further. He wasn't a bad partner, he was a scared human using the only coping mechanism he knew. This understanding didn't excuse the impact on his relationship, but it completely changed his approach. Instead of attacking the wall, the symptom, he could now address the overwhelm, the condition. He could learn to say to his partner, "I'm feeling flooded right now. I need 20 minutes to calm down, and then I can connect." The guilt that had been a pointless, cycling punishment transformed into a useful signal pointing toward a genuine need, the need for space to self-regulate. Ben's story illustrates the shift from a morality of judgment to a morality of care. A morality of judgment asks, is this action good or bad? Am I good or bad? It deals in fixed labels and demands punishment for infractions. A morality of care asks, what is needed here? What is the most compassionate and skillful response to this situation, given the conditions? It is fluid, responsive, and focused on alleviating suffering, including your own. The Buddha's ethical precepts are not commandments handed down for you to fail at and then hate yourself for failing. They are principles of training, guidelines for creating the conditions, internal and external, for less suffering and more freedom. They are part of the gardening, not the mechanic's manual. This is why awareness itself is corrective, but not violent. When you bring a steady, kind attention to a habit, truly see it in operation, feel its full consequences in your body and heart, the habit often begins to lose its power on its own. You don't need to declare war on it. You simply see it clearly, and seeing it clearly is like turning on a light in a dusty attic. The old trunks and shadows lose their mysterious, frightening power. You realize, oh, this is just that old habit. This is just fear wearing a disguise. The energy that was spent in fighting the habit is now freed. You are no longer in a battle, you are in a process of reacquaintance and relearning. So, the practice becomes one of replacing correction with curiosity. The next time you find yourself engaging in a behavior you regret, experiment. See if you can pause the instant replay of guilt. Instead, invite a question. A simple, non-blaming question. What was happening for me just then? What did I believe in that moment? What was I most afraid of? Don't rush for an answer. Just hold the question like a soft light, shining it on the memory. Often, the insight that arises is not about your fundamental badness, but about your fundamental humanity, your vulnerability, your longing for safety, your deep, often unconscious, strategies for navigating a complex world. This approach requires trust. Trust that understanding is a more powerful agent of change than condemnation. Trust that your heart, when not under siege, knows the direction of healing. It is the trust of the gardener who believes in the seed's innate impulse to grow toward the sun, given the right conditions. Your task is not to be the sun, or to force the growth. Your task is to till the soil of your own awareness, to pull the weeds of harsh judgment, and to provide the water of compassionate attention. Then, you can wait and watch, with patience, as something new and beautiful begins to grow from within. Shall we explore how to cultivate this soil of compassionate attention? There is a profound difference between feeling the pain of a memory and reopening a wound. The first is an inevitable part of being human, of having a past that shaped you. The second is a choice, a habit of mind that we often mistake for a duty. We believe that to honor the past, to prove we have learned, we must periodically revisit our old pains and re-experience the sting. We treat our memories not as events that have passed, but as live wires we must keep touching to prove they still carry a charge. We call this not forgetting. We call this being aware of our mistakes. But from a place of wisdom, this is seen as a subtle form of self-harm, a way of keeping suffering alive long after its original cause has faded. The Buddha taught mindfulness of the present moment for a reason. The past is gone. The future is not yet here. The only place you can live, learn, and be free is now. When you drag the past into the present through obsessive, emotional replay, you are not learning from it, you are allowing it to colonize your current life. You are letting a ghost dictate the atmosphere of your home. The lesson from a past event is not in the raw emotional pain of it. The lesson is in the understanding you extract, the insight into cause and effect, into your own patterns, into the nature of suffering itself. Once that insight is integrated, continuing to emotionally flay yourself with the memory serves no purpose other than to feed a narrative of pain. This is the distinction between memory as a teacher and memory as a torturer. A teaching memory arises, brings a clear insight or a sober reminder, and then it passes. It feels complete. A torturing memory arises like a broken record, repeating the same emotional scene without delivering any new information. It feels sticky, cyclical, and draining. It leaves you feeling worse, not wiser. One of the most compassionate things you can do for yourself is to learn to recognize the torturer and, gently but firmly, decline its invitation to relive the pain. I want to tell you about Priya. Years ago, Priya had made a significant professional error that cost her company a client. She had learned from it, changed her procedures, and become one of the most meticulous people in her field. Yet, every time she faced a new challenge or received praise, the memory would surge back, not as a quiet lesson, but as a visceral wave of shame. Her heart would race, her face would flush, as if it were happening all over again. She believed this was her conscience keeping her humble. But one day, her therapist asked her, "What new information does this feeling give you about that event?" Priya was stunned. She realized the feeling gave her nothing new. She already knew every detail of the mistake and its consequences. The shame wasn't teaching, it was just punishing. It was a phantom limb of guilt, aching long after the wound had healed. Her task was no longer to learn the lesson, but to learn how to stop reactivating the old, learned pain. She began to practice, when the memory arose, saying softly to herself, "The lesson is learned. This is just the old fear." She would then firmly bring her attention to her feet on the floor, to the objects in the room around her, anchoring herself in the safety of the present. Slowly, the memory lost its emotional hijacking power. Priya's experience touches on the Buddhist concept of impermanence. All things that arise, pass away. This includes painful events and their associated feelings. When we cling to a painful memory, refusing to let its associated feeling pass, we are fighting impermanence. We are trying to make something temporary permanent. We are building a museum for a moment of pain and insisting on being its full-time curator. The practice of letting memories be memories is an act of aligning with reality, of accepting that what has passed, has passed. You honor it not by keeping it artificially alive, but by carrying the wisdom forward into your present actions. So, how do we work with memories when they arise, not as calm lessons, but as emotional tsunamis? The key is grounding in the present body. The memory exists in the mind as thought and image, but its power comes from the bodily sensations it triggers, the tightness, the heat, the sinking feeling. When you feel a painful memory taking hold, do not follow the story. Instead, drop your awareness down. Feel your feet on the ground. Feel the contact of your body with the chair. Feel the air moving in and out of your nostrils. This is not running away. This is running to what is real and solid right now. The memory is a shadow from the past. Your body, breathing here and now, is the substance. By anchoring in the body, you pull energy out of the mental movie and into present moment reality. The memory, deprived of the fuel of your frantic attention, begins to lose its intensity. Furthermore, we can practice changing our relationship to the story. The memory itself is not the problem, it is the meaning we attach to it. The story, that happened, and it proves I am flawed, is the source of ongoing pain. Can you experiment with changing the narrative? Not to a positive one, but to a more factual, less self-defining one. For example, that happened. It was painful. I learned about the importance of double-checking my work. I am a person who learned that lesson. This simple reframe moves the event from being an identity stamp, I am a failure, to being a historical event in the life of a learning, evolving human being. It contains the lesson without the lifelong condemnation. This work allows for a true and deep integration. Integration is not about forgetting. It is about the memory finding its proper place. Not in the foreground of your daily consciousness, shouting for attention, but in the background of your wisdom, quietly informing your choices. An integrated memory is like a scar. You know it's there. It reminds you of a certain vulnerability. But it is healed. You don't pick at it every day. You don't let its presence prevent you from moving freely. It is part of your history, not the dictator of your present. Your practice this week could be this: when a painful old memory surfaces and begins to pull you into its emotional vortex, pause. Place a hand on your heart, or feel your feet firmly on the floor. Take 3 conscious breaths. Then, silently acknowledge, this is a memory. It is not happening now. See if you can sense the difference between the thought of the past event and the actual, safe reality of this present moment, the light in the room, the sounds, the solidity beneath you. You are learning to be here, now, while the ghost of then slowly learns it can no longer haunt you. Consider the most compassionate person you know. Picture them in your mind. What is the quality of their presence? They are likely steady, patient, and deeply attentive. They are not frantically trying to fix you or solve your problem the instant it arises. They create a space of acceptance around you, and within that space, healing becomes possible. Now, what if you could offer that same quality of presence to yourself? This is the heart of the matter. Self-compassion is not a mood you feel, it is a space you hold. It is the internal equivalent of that person's steady, welcoming silence. It is the conscious decision to stop being your own persecutor and start being your own sanctuary. We often resist this because we believe compassion will make us soft, that it will erode our standards and let us off the hook. This is a critical misunderstanding. Compassion is not permissiveness. Permissiveness says, whatever you do is fine. Compassion says, I see you are suffering. How can I help? One ignores the consequence, the other addresses the cause with care. True compassion has a backbone of clarity. It sees the harmful action clearly, and precisely because it sees the suffering it causes, in yourself and others, it is motivated to change. But it changes from a place of understanding, not from a place of self-loathing. A parent who loves their child does not beat the child to teach them not to run into the street. They hold the child's hand, explain the danger, and create a safe boundary. The lesson is learned through connection and care, not through fear. Why do we treat ourselves with less wisdom than we would treat a child? The Buddha's teachings are saturated with compassion, karuna. It is one of the Brahmaviharas, the sublime abidings, a state of mind to be cultivated endlessly. It is the quivering of the heart in response to suffering, coupled with the wish to relieve it. And it must logically begin with the being closest to you, yourself. If your heart is closed to your own pain, how can it genuinely open to the pain of another? Your relationship with yourself sets the tone for every other relationship. A mind at war with itself will perceive the world as a battlefield. A mind at peace with itself can meet the world from a place of grounded strength. Let me share a story about a man named Leo. Leo was a veteran who carried not only the memories of war, but a deep-seated belief that his survival guilt was a necessary tribute to those who did not make it. To let go of his pain, to be kind to himself, felt like a betrayal of his fallen comrades. His suffering was his monument. In a support group, another veteran said something that changed his life. He said, "Carrying that pain isn't keeping them alive. It's keeping you in the grave with them. What if honoring them means living a life so full and so present that it carries the light they missed?" For Leo, this reframed everything. His compassion for his lost friends could now manifest not as a lifelong sentence of sorrow, but as a commitment to live with profound presence and integrity, to live a life that would matter. The first step was to extend a fraction of that compassion to his own wounded soul, to see his own suffering as something worthy of care, not just as a permanent penance. This didn't erase the past, it changed the relationship to it from one of slavery to one of sacred responsibility. Leo's journey illuminates a powerful Buddhist principle, the interdependence of all things. Your suffering is not an isolated event. It affects your thoughts, your health, your actions, and everyone you interact with. When you hold your own pain with compassion, you are not engaging in a selfish act. You are performing a radical act of repair on a node in the vast web of life. You are calming a ripple of suffering that would otherwise spread outward. By meeting your own guilt or shame with understanding instead of hatred, you prevent that negativity from leaking into your tone of voice, your reactions, your decisions. You become a source of greater stability for everyone around you. Self-compassion, therefore, is a social good. So, how do we cultivate this when the habit of self-attack is so strong? We start with micro-moments of mercy. You do not need to generate a grand feeling of love for yourself. You simply need to interrupt the automatic cascade of cruelty with one small, deliberate act of neutrality or kindness. It could be as simple as, when you make a small mistake, instead of, "I'm so stupid," you breathe and say, "Oops." Human moment. When you feel overwhelmed, instead of, "I can't handle anything," you place a hand on your heart and feel its beat for 10 seconds. When the critic is ranting, you imagine putting its voice on mute, or turning down its volume. These are not affirmations. They are interventions. They are you, the aware adult, stepping in to care for the part of you that is hurting or scared. You are building a new neural pathway, one of guardianship instead of persecution. Another profound practice is to use the body as an anchor for compassion. The mind can argue with thoughts, but the body responds directly to gentle touch and conscious breath. When you are in distress, try this: place one hand over your heart and the other on your belly. Feel the warmth of your own hands. Feel the rise and fall of your breath beneath them. With each inhale, imagine breathing in a sense of allowance. With each exhale, imagine breathing out the grip of self-judgment. You are not trying to feel anything specific. You are simply using the physical gesture to communicate safety to your nervous system. You are saying, through your hands, I am here. I am with you in this. You are not alone. This somatic practice can bypass the arguing mind and provide direct comfort. This is the revolution. Shifting from being a problem to be solved to being a being to be befriended. Your inner world is not a courtroom. It can be a garden. And in this garden, compassion is the sunlight and the rain. It doesn't pick and choose which plants deserve to grow. It nourishes the entire ecosystem, trusting that with the right conditions, the weeds of harmful habits will naturally lose their dominance, and the flowers of wisdom and peace will have the space to bloom. Shall we practice turning this compassionate light toward one of the most guarded parts of the garden, our sense of failure? And so we arrive here, not at an end, but at a silent, open beginning. We have walked through the landscape of the mind, noticing the well-worn paths of self-attack, the heavy monuments of guilt, and the clever disguises of the inner critic. We have seen how the belief that we must earn peace only postpones it, and how the confusion of pain for progress keeps us circling in familiar storms. The core teaching, the one that has echoed through centuries from the Buddha's awakening, is not a complex philosophy. It is a simple, profound reorientation. You cannot add violence to suffering and call it healing. Peace is not the reward you receive after a long campaign against yourself. Peace is what naturally emerges when the campaign ends. When you lay down the weapons of judgment, when you silence the constant inner commentary, when you stop trying to fix the sky and instead simply allow it to be vast, what remains is not nothing. It is a deep, wordless tranquility. It was there all along, beneath the noise. This is not passive. It is the most active state of all, the activity of non-resistance. It is the strength to be with what is, without immediately needing to change it into something else. In that allowance, something miraculous happens. The mind, no longer under threat, begins to reveal itself. It shows you its fears, its longings, its patterns, not as enemies to be destroyed, but as messages to be understood. This understanding becomes the true engine of change. Change rooted in clarity is stable. Change forced by self-hatred is brittle and temporary. Your practice from this moment forward is not another item on a to-do list. It is an invitation to a different way of being. It is the moment-by-moment choice to meet your experience with curiosity instead of condemnation. When you fail, can you hear the story of failure as a story, and then ask, what is needed now? When you feel guilt, can you sense it as a tightening in the body, breathe into that space, and remember that remorse is the teacher, not the jailer? When you feel unworthy of rest, can you see that thought as a conditioned cloud passing through the sky of your awareness, and choose to rest anyway? You are not a project to be completed. You are a life to be lived. A heart to be felt. a consciousness to be awakened. The goal is not to become a perfect, polished self. The goal is to see through the illusion of a separate, flawed self altogether, and to rest in the luminous, aware presence that you have always been. So tonight, as we close, let there be no grand resolution, no final vow to do better. Let there only be a gentle easing. An exhale. Feel the weight of your body, fully supported. Listen to the silence between sounds. In this quiet, you might sense it, a spaciousness that has room for all of you, the triumphs and the stumbles, the joy and the sorrow, without any of it needing to define you. This is your true home. It was never lost. You were just looking for it in the wrong place. In the future, after enough improvement. It is here. Now. You cannot punish yourself into becoming peaceful. But you can, in this very breath, stop. And in that stopping, peace finds you. Thank you for your courageous presence here in the monk's temple. May the understanding that has touched you tonight continue to unfold gently in your life. May you meet yourself with a kindness that changes everything. Go in peace.